The ATM screen goes black. You tap it again. Nothing. You try your card at the grocery store checkout. Declined. You open your banking app. Error. Cannot connect to server. You refresh. Still nothing. You call the customer service line. All circuits are busy. You check social media. Thousands of people posting the same thing. The banks are closed. All of them. No warning. No explanation. Just gone. In this simulation, we're going to walk through what happens when every major bank in the United States closes its doors for exactly 7 days. Not a cyber attack, not a hack, a coordinated regulatory freeze, something that sounds impossible until you realize it's already happened before. In 1933, Franklin Roosevelt declared a 4-day bank holiday to stop a cascading run on the banking system. He shut down every bank in the country. No exceptions, no access. It worked because people still used cash. They still had physical money in their pockets. Today, we don't. Over 90% of all money in circulation exists only as digital entries in databases. If those databases go dark, that money disappears. Not stolen, not destroyed, just inaccessible. And in a system where everything runs on credit, liquidity, and instant settlement, 7 days might as well be 7 months, we assume the closure is announced Friday evening after markets close. This is standard practice for financial emergencies. Regulators prefer to act when trading floors are empty and the public is distracted by the weekend. The official statement is carefully worded. A temporary measure to ensure system stability, critical infrastructure protection, coordination with international partners. All deposits are safe. All funds will be accessible once systems are restored. Do not panic. But the statement doesn't say why. It doesn't explain what triggered this. And that silence is what makes everything worse. Within 30 minutes, every gas station in the country is overwhelmed. People aren't thinking rationally. They're thinking about the last time they couldn't access money. They're thinking about images of empty shelves and lines around the block. They're thinking about being the person who didn't prepare. So they drive to the nearest station and fill up. Then they fill their spare cans. Then they fill anything that holds liquid. Gas station owners can't process card payments. Some try to take cash, but most people don't carry cash anymore. The average American has less than $50 in physical currency at home. So stations start turning people away. Some stations shut down entirely to avoid the chaos. By midnight, roughly 40% of urban gas stations have run dry. Not because of supply issues, because of panic. Grocery stores are next, the same psychology, the same rush. But grocery stores have a bigger problem. Their entire supply chain runs on just-in-time inventory systems. They don't stockpile weeks of food in the back. They order what they need based on real-time sales data and receive deliveries every day. Those deliveries are paid for electronically. Trucking companies are paid electronically. Warehouse operators are paid electronically. When the banks close, those payments stop, not immediately. Most companies have a few days of float, but they also have obligations: payroll, fuel, insurance. Without the ability to move money, they stop moving goods. By Saturday morning, major retailers are already seeing supply chain slowdowns. By Sunday, shelves are visibly empty in high-demand categories: bread, milk, canned goods, bottled water. People aren't hoarding because they're greedy. They're hoarding because they're scared. And fear is contagious. Pharmacies face a quieter but deadlier crisis. Prescription medications in the United States are tightly regulated and closely tracked. Insurance companies process claims electronically. Pharmacies verify coverage electronically. Patients pay copays electronically. When those systems go down, the entire model collapses. A diabetic who needs insulin can't prove their insurance is valid. A cancer patient who needs chemotherapy drugs can't authorize the payment. Pharmacists are left with an impossible choice: dispense medication without payment and risk their license, or turn people away and risk their lives. Some pharmacies begin operating on informal credit systems. They write down names and promise to settle later. Others shut down completely. The people who suffer most are the ones who are already vulnerable: elderly patients on fixed incomes, people with chronic conditions, anyone who depends on the system working exactly as designed. Hospitals don't close, but they start rationing. Not publicly, not officially, but quietly. Elective surgeries are postponed. Non-emergency procedures are delayed. Staff are told to prioritize life-threatening cases. This isn't cruelty, it's math. Hospitals operate on extraordinarily thin margins. They rely on a constant flow of insurance reimbursements to pay for supplies, equipment, and labor. When that flow stops, they burn through reserves within days. Medical supply companies stop delivering because they can't verify payment. Pharmaceutical distributors hold back shipments. Even hospital staff start calling in sick. Not because they're ill, because they can't afford to work without knowing when they'll be paid. A nurse with 2 kids and rent due in 3 days can't justify showing up when her bank account is frozen and her credit cards don't work. The stock market doesn't crash because it doesn't open. Trading is halted indefinitely, but internationally the damage is already spreading. Foreign investors begin liquidating U.S. assets in any market that's still functioning. Treasury bonds, corporate debt, real estate investment trusts, anything tied to the American financial system. The dollar starts to weaken against major currencies. Not collapse, not hyperinflation, just a steady, relentless slide. Other countries begin quietly discussing alternatives. Emergency liquidity swaps, bilateral payment systems, anything that doesn't require routing through New York. This is how empires lose reserve currency status, not through war or revolution, through a loss of confidence that happens so gradually that no one notices until it's irreversible. By Monday morning, the psychological shift is complete. This is no longer a temporary inconvenience. This is a structural breakdown. People start forming informal barter networks. A mechanic trades an oil change for groceries. A dentist trades a cleaning for firewood. A teacher trades tutoring for childcare. And these networks are inefficient and limited, but they're the only option. Money hasn't disappeared, but trust has. And without trust, money is just numbers on a screen. The people who adapt fastest are the ones who already lived outside the formal economy. Immigrants who send remittances in cash. Small business owners who deal in under-the-table transactions. People who never fully trusted the system in the first place. They're not better prepared because they're smarter. They're better prepared because they were never fully dependent. Law enforcement begins to fracture. Police officers are government employees. They're paid electronically. Their pensions are managed electronically. When those systems freeze, they face the same dilemma as everyone else. Do they keep working without pay, or do they take care of their families? Some departments implement emergency protocols. Officers are given IOUs, promises of back pay, assurances that the government will make them whole. But promises don't buy groceries. By Tuesday, absenteeism in major police departments is running above 30%. Not because officers are lazy, because they're human. Crime doesn't spike dramatically. Most people aren't criminals. But opportunistic theft increases. Looting is reported in several cities, mostly targeting stores that are already closed, mostly taking necessities, diapers, formula batteries, the kind of theft that happens when desperation outweighs morality. The federal government makes an announcement. Emergency measures are being deployed. The National Guard is activated in key cities. FEMA is coordinating distribution of essential supplies. The president addresses the nation. The message is calm, reassuring. We've been through worse. We'll get through this. But the message also includes something new. A request. Conserve resources. Help your neighbors. Stay home unless absolutely necessary. It's not a lockdown, not legally, but it's close. And people comply. Not because they trust the government, because they don't know what else to do. The roads are quieter. The streets are emptier. It feels like the early days of a pandemic. That same eerie stillness. That same sense of waiting for something to break. By Wednesday, small businesses are dying. Not closing. Dying. A restaurant that operates on 2% profit margins can't survive 3 days without revenue. A dry cleaner with rent due and no customers can't pay their lease. A barbershop with a chair loan and utility bills can't keep the lights on. These businesses don't have emergency funds. They don't have lines of credit. They live transaction to transaction. When transactions stop, they stop. The owner locks the door, puts up a sign, going out of business, and that's it. A lifetime of work erased in 72 hours. Multiply that across millions of small businesses, and you're not looking at a recession. You're looking at a structural collapse of the middle class. The businesses that survive are the ones owned by people with cash reserves, or the ones large enough to negotiate extensions with landlords and creditors. Everyone else is gone. Utility companies start issuing warnings. Electricity, water, natural gas. These services require constant maintenance, constant labor, constant payment. When the banks are closed, utility companies can't pay their workers. Workers can't pay their bills. The whole system is built on the assumption that money flows smoothly and predictably. When it doesn't, the system doesn't collapse immediately. But it starts to degrade. Rolling blackouts are implemented in some regions, not because there's a power shortage, because there's a labor shortage. Technicians aren't showing up. Maintenance is being deferred. The infrastructure is still there, but the people who keep it running are losing faith. On Thursday, the federal government announces an emergency currency program. Physical cash will be distributed through designated centers, post offices, libraries, National Guard armories. It's a logistical nightmare. Printing and distributing billions of dollars in physical currency takes time, but it's the only option. People line up for hours, sometimes overnight, not to get rich, just to get enough to survive until the banks reopen. The distributions are capped, $200 per person. It's not enough, but it's something, and something is better than nothing. The people who can't stand in line are left behind. The elderly, the disabled, the people without transportation. They're dependent on neighbors, on charities, on luck. Friday arrives. 6 days since the banks closed. The official statement said 7 days, one more day. But there's no guarantee, no confirmation, just silence. Markets are still frozen. International partners are still scrambling. The damage is already done. Even if the banks open tomorrow, the trust is gone. The belief that the system is stable, that your money is safe, that things will work the way they're supposed to, that belief has been shattered. And once it's gone, it doesn't come back quickly. It takes years, sometimes decades. Some people used this week to prepare. They stocked up. They networked. They figured out how to survive without the system. Others waited. They believed the government. They believed the banks. They believed everything would go back to normal. And maybe it will, but normal isn't what it used to be. Because now everyone knows how fragile it all is, how quickly it can fall apart, how little it takes to go from functional society to something else. The banks open on Saturday morning. The system is restored. Mostly, accounts are accessible. Cards work again. Direct deposits process. But the scars remain. Businesses that closed won't reopen. Jobs that were lost won't return. Trust that was broken won't be rebuilt overnight. And somewhere, quietly, planners and analysts are writing reports, studying what happened, looking for weaknesses, trying to make sure it never happens again. But they're also realizing something uncomfortable. This wasn't a failure of technology. It was a failure of design. The system only works when everyone believes it works. The moment that belief cracks, everything else follows. If you want to see what happens when that crack becomes permanent, when the closure isn't 7 days but 7 months, watch what we explore next. And if this made you think, if it made you uncomfortable, that's the point. Understanding the system means understanding how easily it breaks.